This is police body cam footage of a 12-year-old boy who just climbed out of a window in Ivins, Utah, emaciated and begging a neighbor for food and water.
Hi, I was just wondering if you could do 2 favors.
Well, what are they?
Taking me to the nearest police station.
The house he escaped from didn't belong to a stranger. It belonged to Jodi Hildebrandt, a licensed mental health counselor. And the woman who left him there was his own mother, Franke, a parenting vlogger with 4 million subscribers.
An interview. The last portion of trying to get the kids into this private school is the interviews, and that's today. And then we should be...
When the public watched both women plead guilty to 6 counts of aggravated child abuse, people assumed this was just another influencer taking discipline too far. But the court records and clinical timelines prove something much more insidious. This wasn't a loss of temper. It was a systematic torture ring that operated in plain sight for years, using Hildebrandt's state counseling license and the language of therapy as an institutional shield against child welfare laws.
I am not taking babe unless you come and give me a huge apology. You come give me a hug and you come say you're sorry. No, again, where I can pay attention. It was not very thankful of you. I was excited and I told you to go get on your shoes and your jacket to see a movie. And you should say, okay, and be grateful. Instead of, well, what movie? Well, I don't know. Let me think about it. That's not very grateful, and I'm not going to take a girl who's not grateful.
Franke looked like someone you'd trust. She ran 8 Passengers, a family vlog with millions of subscribers, built around her 6 kids and her strict rules. She talked about discipline. She talked about structure. Some people online called her too harsh. Most just called her relatable, a mom trying her best in public. Then in 2020, Ruby partnered with Jodi Hildebrandt, a licensed mental health counselor. Hildebrandt had built her own brand called Connections around a rigid idea of personal accountability. She wasn't just Ruby's friend, she became her guide. Therefore, the language in Ruby's world started to shift. It stopped being about parenting. It became about truth, about distortion, a word Hildebrandt used for anyone, including children, who resisted their rules. But underneath the new vocabulary, something much darker was building. The children were subjected to systematic starvation, forced physical labor, physical restraint. And the 2 women filmed themselves talking about these punishments as if they were acts of love. Picture that for a second. 2 grown women sitting across from a camera, calmly describing starving a child and calling it a correction. The public didn't see any of this. What the public saw was a confident mother and a credentialed expert talking about boundaries and truth. Nothing about it looked like a crime. That was the entire point. Here's what most people assumed for years. If something was really wrong in that house, someone would have caught it, right? A teacher, a neighbor, Child Protective Services. Surely the system would catch a mother who was hurting her kids on camera. What about the viewers who watched her content and influenced by her? What would have happened to their children? How do they have suffered? That is something we will never know. Let that sit for a second. Nobody caught anything. CPS was contacted more than once over the years, but the abuse wasn't leaving obvious marks the system was built to detect. It was psychological. It was methodical. And whenever anyone pushed back, a relative, a concerned neighbor, even investigators, Hildebrandt had a tool the average person didn't. She was a licensed counselor. She could reframe every red flag as a misunderstanding of the children's needs. That's the trap. Not a loophole in the law, a loophole in how much people trust a credential. By calling their work coaching instead of therapy, Hildebrandt and Franke also stepped outside the normal oversight that governs licensed counseling. Coaching isn't policed the way therapy is. So the very framework meant to catch dangerous helpers simply didn't apply to what they were doing. For years, that framework held, the language held, the vlogs kept posting, the coaching sessions kept running. Then, in August 2023, it broke, because a 12-year-old boy climbed out of a window. He was emaciated. He had lacerations on his body. He climbed out of Jodi Hildebrandt's house and knocked on a neighbor's door, asking for food and water. I feel pity for those children. That single moment is the one none of their language could survive.
911, the address of your emergency.
Boys show up here at my front door asking for help. And he's said he just came from a neighbor's house, and we know there's been problems at this neighbor's house. He's emaciated, he's got tape around his legs, he's hungry, and he's thirsty. And he asked us to call the police.
What's
So
his
he's
name?
very afraid. Her name is Jodi Hildebrandt, and she lives 2 doors up the street. Doorbell, and asked me to call the police.
Does he seem to be under the influence of drugs or alcohol?
I don't think so, but he's very thirsty, and his ankles are taped up, and he won't tell us why.
Okay.
But he has duct taped around each ankle.
Police body cam footage captured what happened next. Officers arriving, realizing almost immediately that this wasn't a misunderstanding.
Police officers, open up! Jodi, I need you to step out.
I have my attorney.
That's great. Step out of the house.
No, I'm not gonna step out of the
Step out of the
house.
house.
Step out of the house.
Whoa, 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 whoa!
We're just gonna see if
on.
anybody else.
Whoa,
Is there anybody else home?
Wait a minute, how do you come in my house?
Right there.
Look, they go on into my house.
Just have a seat right there.
Do you have a search warrant?
Have a seat right there.
Do you have a search
Have
warrant?
a seat right there.
That doesn't make sense. You come into my house and do what you want, and then you tell me you don't have a
No,
warrant?
we'll explain why we did.
But don't you have to have a warrant?
Not at this moment, we don't.
The subsequent search of Hildebrandt's home uncovered a second child, a 10-year-old girl, in a similar state of starvation. All the vocabulary, the truth, the distortion, the accountability, collapsed the second it met a police report.
We received a report of an emaciated juvenile that had duct tape around his extremities, that was asking for food and water, and based on that information there are other people in the home, so we're ensuring that there is nobody else in the same condition.
Because starvation isn't a therapeutic concept, it's a felony.
The state respectfully requests that the court sentence Ms. Franke to consecutive prison terms for each of the 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. This sentence was agreed to by Ms. Franke in her plea agreement and is also recommended by adult probation and parole. She committed horrible acts of child abuse. From May to August in 2023, Ms. Franke and her business partner held her 2 children, ages 9 and 11, turning 12, in a concentration camp-like setting. The children were regularly denied food, water, beds to sleep in, and virtually all forms of entertainment. They were isolated from others and were hidden when people came to visit the house where the children and the defendants were staying. The children were forced to do physical tasks like carrying loaded boxes up and down stairs and wall sits or sitting against a wall without a chair or a stool for hours at a time. They were also forced to do manual labor outdoors in the extreme summer heat, at times without shoes or socks. They were forced to stand outside on a cement patio in the summer heat for hours and even days at a time. They were beaten, and the 12-year-old was regularly bound hand and foot after he attempted to run away in mid-July. Both children had extensive physical injuries from the abuse that required hospitalization when they were found. The injuries from the binding to the 12-year-old are particularly awful. In addition to physical abuse, the children were emotionally abused to the extent that each believed, to some degree, that they deserved what was being done to them. Had the older of the children not had the courage to run away and ask a neighbor to call the police, heaven only knows how much longer he could have survived in that situation. After being caught, Ms. Franke has shown considerable remorse, as evidenced by agreeing to serve consecutive prison terms and being willing to cooperate with the state against Ms. Hildebrandt. However, given the severity of the abuse she inflicted, consecutive terms are appropriate in this case.
Ms. Franke served 4 counts, 4 1 to 15-year sentences based on her convictions for 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. Again, they will be served consecutively pursuant to the parties' agreement and the applicable statute. Under the applicable statute, the court finds that that consecutive sentences are appropriate. This circumstance is tragic. It's largely, of course, of your making. By any measure, your conduct in this case was disastrous for these children. Adults are supposed to protect children. Adults with specialized training in particular are supposed to protect children. You didn't do that in this case. In this case, you terrorized children, and the results...
Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt were each charged with 6 counts of felony aggravated child abuse. In December 2023, both women pleaded guilty. They were sentenced to 4 consecutive terms of 1 to 15 years each, the maximum allowed under Utah law. Consecutive, not concurrent. That word matters. It means the sentences stack on top of each other rather than running at the same time, the harshest structure the court could hand down. The woman who spent years building a brand around discipline and truth is now defined by a single permanent legal record: aggravated child abuse, times 6. The license obviously got terminated. You know what I keep coming back to? Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt didn't fool the world with lies. They fooled the world with language and credentials, using state-approved titles to disguise something cruel. I am thinking about all those children who suffered this atrocity, and I feel pity for those parents who got influenced by these 2 women. I cover these type of cases, and I am not going to lie. It's definitely take a toll every time, because these cases are really very depressing. This is another depressing tragedy that I have covered in this channel, where another 13-year-old girl, Michaela, to be betrayed by her stepfather and her guardian ad litem. That was definitely a tragic case. It's on your screen now. I recommend you watch it.